Yeah.
All right, now let's just take Ghana and continue talking about them. So I mentioned in the introduction that they're a member of the African peer review mechanisms. Has it assisted in its growth? Has this been one of the reasons we've seen such an incredible growth there?
I definitely think so. If you look at the inception of NEPAD in 2001, one of the first initiatives to promote transparency in Africa was the launch of the African peer review mechanism. And that really is a process where country governments play open books on the economic, political, social and corporate governance status. And I think going through that process, a country has to evaluate and reflect upon itself as to how these processes are in place and also devise a program of action on how they're going to correct or transform policies to ensure better transparency.
Yeah.
And Ghana was the first country that volunteered to go through this process about 12 years ago. And if you look at the last 12 years, its GDP growth rate, as mentioned, has reached to 7.9%. I think it certainly contributed to its growth.
I mean, when we unfortunately look at one of the biggest stumbling blocks of doing business in Africa, we highlighted it as well, is infrastructure. I think that's one of the biggest problems. Now, I know that an MOU has been signed with NEPAD. Tell us more about this.
The NEPAD agency and the AU have a continental framework for infrastructure development called PIDA, the Program for Infrastructure Development for Africa. And that has identified 51 infrastructure programs that cross borders. And the idea is that these projects will link countries and enable them to trade easier with each other as well as with international investors. This program is very comprehensive, and there are about 8 projects that have been identified and prioritized across the continent. You also have, furthermore, champions in the various African presidents who have taken on themselves to champion 7 or 8 of these projects to ensure that the cross-border political will is there to make sure that these projects are implemented.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the World Bank estimating that to close the infrastructure gap in Africa, we need $93 billion annually. Is this a reality? Can this be achieved?
I certainly think so. 93 billion sounds like a massive amount. It is, certainly. Yeah. And what we're doing at the NBF is we've created, with the support of Transnet, the Africa Infrastructure Desk, where we're now mobilizing private sector investment into infrastructure. Traditionally, infrastructure was seen predominantly to be the government's role and responsibility, but the governments do not have sufficient funding to finance that themselves. And so private sector is increasingly being called upon to play a more active role in not only the development of the projects, but the financing as well. And so we've selected 5 projects in the Southern African region, where we're looking at 2 ports in Tanzania. We're looking at 2 railway lines that go through Zambia and Tanzania, and a regional rolling stock hub. So we're actively now bringing together private sector companies to work together with the governments to look at how can we accelerate the implementation of these projects.
Yeah. Just finally, I mean, you've already said it basically. So private sector, are they heeding the call? Because we did see that NEPAD said this, that governments can't do this alone. Private sector is needed.
Absolutely, and private sector is very willing. I think the problem has been the lack of engagement or communication. And through the Africa Infrastructure Desk, we're bringing together the right parties. Also, I think private sector in South Africa predominantly are battling to compete with the Chinese model, which offers a full package solution to countries. And we're saying that the expertise, the resources do reside here, and that we really should be approaching a similar fashion, but finding an African model on how to approach infrastructure.
All right, thanks for chatting to us. Lynette Chen is the CEO of the NEPAD Business Foundation, just talking to us about infrastructure and some of the hindrances here on the African continent, but hopefully things turning around. Thank you so much for talking to us here.